They called it lycanthropy. I called it survival. I was 16 when I was dragged into that courtroom, barely more than skin and bone, my wrists bruised from shackles that never came off, not even at night. The room stank of old wood, wet wool, and wax. 3 men in dark robes sat behind the bench, their eyes hollow with judgment, their mouths twitching with a thirst they never admitted, thirst for fear, for spectacle, for a confession. The first time I saw one of them smile, it wasn't because they thought I was innocent. The trial was already decided before I stepped into that room. They didn't need a verdict. They needed a story. And I was the ending they had been waiting for. They said I was a beast, a loup-garou, that I had torn through sheep and pigs and children in the northern woods, that on the night of the full moon my back arched, my bones cracked, and I sprinted into the black to feed on flesh. They showed the claw marks. They paraded the child's tunic with dried blood. They spoke of curses of Satan's pact of hair sprouting from wounds and eyes that gleamed like an animal's in the dark. And then they asked me to explain. Explain. What was I to say that none of it was real? That I was just a boy whose village needed a monster? I opened my mouth, but silence came first. I didn't know when it began. Not really. The first night I noticed the change, I had been sleeping in the stables. My father had locked me out again. He said I was too loud, too wild in my sleep. That I snarled, that I bit. I thought he was drunk, or cruel, or both. But that night I did wake with blood in my mouth. My tongue was sore, bitten through. My hands were scratched. The lamb in the stall beside me gone. The next day, the story started. Something was killing again. Something that walked on 2 legs and left no trail. Something with yellow eyes. No one looked at me yet. But they stopped asking me to join them in the fields. A week passed. Then another. On the second full moon, I woke miles away from the stables. Naked, cold. Mud caked to my legs and my fingernails, no claws, chipped and black. But I wasn't alone. There was a man beside me. He wore a hood, but his voice was smooth like polished bone. "You're lucky they haven't burned you yet," he said. "But they will, unless you learn the truth." And then he vanished. That was when I started writing everything down, in secret, in panic, in blood when I had nothing else. My journal, my only shield against the madness. I wrote about the sleepless nights, about the strength that came in pulses, about the boy from the bakery who stopped coming to the market, about the glint of metal I saw under the priest's robes. I wrote about the third moon, when they came. Not villagers, not priests, doctors, men in long coats smelling of vinegar and iron. They said I was of interest, that I was being watched. They asked questions that didn't feel like questions at all. What did I dream of? Did I feel pain when I changed? Did I recognize faces when I returned to human form? And most important, was I born this way? No one asked if I was scared. They only wanted to know how I became what I was. But I wasn't the only one, I know that now. There were others, scattered across the hills and swamps and ruins of forgotten villages. Boys like me. Girls who vanished after turning 15. Men who had lost their tongues and lived like dogs in the woods. And those who didn't survive the change. Some called it a curse. Some called it a cure. I didn't understand that last part, not yet. But something was being built beneath the surface. Something with roots deeper than religion, wider than medicine. And whatever it was, I was part of it. They called me a werewolf, a monster. But what if the monster was not me? What if it was the hand that broke me, reassembled me, and let me loose into the night? What if the werewolf was man-made? Now I sit here on trial, not for what I've done, but for what they fear I might become. And this is my testimony. Let them call me beast, let them pass their sentence. But history will remember who turned the boy into the wolf. And it wasn't the moon. The village of Aberholtz no longer exists on any map. You won't find it in the registry of the church, nor in the books of the crown. The roads leading to it have long been buried by moss and ash, as though nature herself wished to forget. But I remember it, because I was taken there. It began with a knock at the door. No torches, no shouting, just a single rap, cold and deliberate. My mother opened it. A man stood in the threshold. Not a soldier, not a priest. His clothes were clean but worn. His beard trimmed like a man of science. And in his hand, a letter with a broken seal. He didn't speak to her. He looked at me. And I followed. They didn't force me. They didn't have to. When you feel like a disease in your own skin, even the promise of a cure is enough to make you walk into the lion's den. The carriage was silent. He didn't ask my name, he already knew it. The path grew colder, narrower, lined with trees that leaned too close to hear secrets. When the wheels finally stopped, the village was gone, replaced by something older, darker. Stone walls, cracked gates, iron windows. Aberholtz. I expected cells, chains, screaming. But it was quiet. Too quiet. The doctor I only ever heard him called Murnau led me through hallways lined with faces I couldn't see. Shadows behind curtains. Whispers in Latin. Rooms that smelled of wet copper and dried herbs. He told me it was a clinic. That I was special. That I had been selected. For what? He didn't say. But I wasn't alone. There were others. Boys with dull eyes. Girls with claw marks on their wrists. One man who barked at the ceiling and refused to eat unless it was raw. They called us patients, but we weren't there to be healed. We were there to be observed. Murnau kept notebooks. Hundreds of them. He studied our sleep, our eating, our reactions to sound, scent, moonlight. He tested us with mirrors, salt, holy water. He drew blood every third night. I asked him once, why me? He looked up, removed his spectacles, and said softly, because you survived the first change. Most don't. I didn't sleep after that. There was a boy named Jacob. He had the clearest eyes I'd ever seen. He barely spoke, but at night he wept. Not from pain, from memories. I remember biting her. He told me once, his voice hoarse. I didn't want to, but I was hungry. Not for food, for sound, for fear. He didn't last long. They said he ran, but I heard the cries that night, and I saw the fresh scratches on Murnau's sleeves. Every week someone left. Sometimes it was silent, sometimes it wasn't. I started counting the empty beds. One by one we were being undone. The tests changed. They became harsher. Cold water baths. Isolation in dark chambers. Forced hallucinations. They gave us herbs that made our skin burn. Potions that turned our mouths dry and teeth brittle. One day, they branded a girl with iron just to observe the healing rate. I watched her flesh bubble. She didn't scream. She just stared into the fire as though it knew her better than anyone else ever had. It was no longer science. It was ritual. Then one morning I woke to find my door unlocked. A mistake. A test. I didn't wait to find out. I ran. Not through the front. That was always guarded. I remembered a crack in the cellar wall, a passage behind crates, damp and black with mold. It led to a tunnel or a tomb. I couldn't tell. I crawled for hours, maybe days, until I smelled fresh air again. Until I saw the moon. Until I howled. Not out of instinct, out of grief. I had left Aberholtz, but it hadn't left me. There were things they did to us there. Things I still feel when the wind shifts, when a dog growls, when someone touches my neck. They weren't trying to cure us. They were trying to create something stronger, something obedient, something that wouldn't just survive the transformation but control it. I remember Murnau's final words to me. Not in person. I found them scribbled in the margins of one of his discarded notebooks. The true werewolf is not bound by the moon nor myth. It is a perfected being forged in pain, shaped by fear, and loyal to the hand that feeds it. He didn't believe in monsters. He believed in progress. And I was just one of his drafts. But I escaped. And now I write. Because somewhere someone else is still being selected. And if I don't tell you what they did in Aberholtz, they'll keep doing it in other names, other rooms, other hands that call themselves healers but burn cleaner than any demon. This isn't just about werewolves. This is about the things humans will do when they forget what it means to be human. And when they decide to make something else. Long before Aberholtz, long before I ever tasted blood in my sleep, there were whispers. You find them not in stories told around hearths. Those are softened things, safe things. But in the margins of forgotten books and drawings, etched behind church panels and lullabies, mothers stopped singing once the second child vanished. The wolf was never just an animal, and the werewolf was never just a man. They called them many names. Warg Berserker, Therianthropy Skin Changer, depending on which broken corner of Europe you crawl through. But they always return to one idea: that something in us could be called out by the moon, by pain, by God, or by men who knew how. I first saw the book in a monastery archive. Years after I escaped, I had taken work cleaning ruins in the south, places that smelled like old prayers and wet dust. One of the friars took pity on me. He gave me bread. Then one night he gave me a key. "There's a room they pretend doesn't exist," he said. Inside, stacked like bones behind rusted shelves, were volumes bound in skin. I'm not sure it was always animal. One was marked simply, De Lupinis. It wasn't written like folklore. It read like protocol. Descriptions of induction rites, anatomical diagrams, stages of transformation, not mystical, but medical. Pages stamped with crests, long-lost names of barons, bishops, surgeons. It didn't begin as a curse. It began as a program, the first successful werewolf, if the pages are to be believed, was not cursed by a bite. He was bled. Slowly, over 37 nights. Given tinctures of wolfsbane and ash, his body stretched between fasting and fever, until something inside him broke open. He survived. He changed, not fully, not cleanly, but enough. They called him Hostis. Not his real name, perhaps a label, a category. Hostis was then taken north. That's where the killing began. Villages torn apart, not random selected. Sites of heresy of resistance. Wolves as weapons. The perfect punishment. No blade, no fire, just terror in the dark. But the church, at least the public arm, didn't approve. Or so they claimed. And so a new order was born. The Venatorius Umbri. Hunters of the shadow. You've heard whispers of them. Knights in iron masks. Monks who carried silver knives. Exorcists who spoke no Latin, only the howl. They moved in silence. Trained in isolation. And they weren't there to stop the wolves. They were there to retrieve them, to bring the broken ones back, to perfect them. "I found their motto burned into a door deep beneath that ruined abbey non luna," said Manus. Not the moon, but the hand. The werewolf, they believed, was not the result of nature, but of craft. A thing to be honed like a blade. A creature of will, not accident. Somewhere along the way their secret fractured. Factions splintered. Some wanted to control the wolves, others to destroy them. And some, the worst of them, wanted to become them. The texts grew darker. Diagrams of teeth grafted into living flesh. Spines opened and restructured. Children raised on raw meat in isolation. Trials by moonlight failure, marked by dismemberment. And always the same refrain. Fear is the first ingredient. When I left that place, I took one page with me. It wasn't the most damning, but it was the clearest. A drawing. A boy no older than 12 bound to a chair, his mouth sewn shut, his chest open, lungs exposed. In the margins a note in tight Latin script. Progress. Responsive to lunar cycles after 17 sessions. Awaiting stability before release. Release. Like he was a bird. Like he wasn't human at all. I burned that page. I still dream of the ash. Because the truth is not that men became wolves. It's that men, cloaked in righteousness, draped in science, turned children into monsters, and then buried the bones beneath their altars. The beast was never born. He was built. Now I ask myself, why tell this? Why now? Because I feel the edge again. That sharpness in the blood. That pulse beneath the fingernails. The part of me that survived their cage has learned to live in silence. But it's still there, waiting. And if I don't speak now, if I don't open the wound and let it bleed, someone else will find the same book, the same notes, and believe they've discovered something new. They haven't. They're just walking deeper into the woods, blind to the fact that the monster doesn't hide in the trees. He writes the guidebooks and teaches others to howl. I don't remember what happened the first time I hurt someone. Not truly. I remember flashes, blood under fingernails, the stink of sweat and terror. The way my jaw ached, as if I'd been chewing something far too large. And then silence. Like someone had pulled a curtain across my mind. When I came to, I was lying in a stairwell, shirt-soaked, pants torn. And a woman was screaming 2 floors up. I ran. I always ran. That was how I lived for years. Half asleep, half alert, chasing pieces of myself like a dog, chasing its own tail. Cities changed. Names changed. But the hunger never did. and the blackouts grew longer. The doctors I saw called it trauma-induced dissociation. Some blamed it on childhood abuse. Others said it was PTSD from unidentified events. One even diagnosed me with a rare form of nocturnal epilepsy. But no one asked the question that kept me awake at night. What if I wasn't sick? What if I was programmed? I found the first clue in an envelope. No return address. Inside a photograph of me from years ago, strapped to a gurney in a metal room. My eyes wide, my mouth open in a scream. Behind me, 3 men in surgical masks, one of them holding a clipboard marked "Retrieved, unstable." It was stamped with a symbol I had seen before in the ruins beneath Aberholtz. That coin with the wolf's head. The same words burned into the edge, non luna sed manus. Not the moon, but the hand. And then I remembered a noise, like a machine, like metal slamming into place inside my chest. I had always thought it was just panic. Now I wasn't so sure. The second clue came in dreams, more vivid than ever before. Faces I didn't recognize, words I couldn't translate. A hallway of red doors, a child laughing, a scalpel falling, but most of all the sound of my own voice, begging someone not to put me under again. I started keeping a journal, like before, but this time I tracked everything: hours, slept, dreams, recalled foods, eaten, strange bruises, and something began to emerge. Patterns. The full moon was no longer the trigger. I had changed under crescent moons during eclipses, even once at dawn. What mattered wasn't the sky, it was the presence. Whenever I was being watched, whenever someone wanted me to change, the triggers weren't natural. They were psychological, induced, which meant someone still had access, still had control, or thought they did. Because I was changing on my own now, not just my body, my memories. I started to remember flashes from Aberholtz that had been missing: screams in a metal corridor being dunked in ice water, the voice of Murnau saying stability first, identity second. They had tried to erase who I was, to replace it with something they could command. They failed, but not completely. Sometimes I feel him, the one they tried to build. He's not angry. He's patient. He waits in the marrow. In the voice that whispers when I lock the door 3 times instead of once. In the ache behind my eyes when I hear a child cry. In the taste of rust that makes my mouth water when someone's afraid. He is me, but more efficient. He doesn't doubt. He doesn't ask. He doesn't regret. He just acts. And the worst part, sometimes I envy him, because in his world there are no questions, only purpose. But I'm still here, still trying to be a man, still writing, still searching, still bleeding on pages like they matter. Because if I stop even for a day, he might step forward and not step back. I found a facility last winter, abandoned, upstate, hidden under the name of a tech research firm. Snow buried the signage, but I broke through a rusted hatch in the woods. Inside rooms with straps, needles, video logs. One of them had me on it. Younger, shaved head, eyes glassy. I was tearing through a metal door. The footage cut out before I got through. In another room I found cages, not for animals, for children. Names carved into the walls, old drawings. A small doll's head still tied to the bars. Whatever they were doing there, it wasn't just about me. It was about generation, iteration. They weren't trying to make one monster. They were trying to refine it. I left that place burning. The fire climbed higher than the trees. I watched it alone, and for a moment I felt clean. But I know that was just another illusion. Because I found something in my jacket pocket after. A note, typed, no signature, just 4 words. The prototype 12 recovered memory. They knew I had come. They wanted me to see it, because I was never lost to them. I was just paused, until they chose to resume. And I think now they already have. Last night I woke up in my own hallway. Blood on the wall. Not mine. A voice in my head saying, stability first, identity second. The programming is still inside me. The monsters is waiting for instructions. But this time I don't plan to follow them. This time I'm going to write my own. They say you shouldn't chase ghosts, but ghosts are the only things that leave trails in the dark. After the incident in my hallway, the blood, the voice, the memory that wasn't mine, I stopped running. I started tracking every name I could remember from the facility, every symbol I'd seen etched in stone or stitched into coats, Every location tied to Fenris, the name I'd once heard whispered behind a steel door, followed by the sound of screaming. It wasn't easy. You don't find these people on Google. They don't advertise. Their secrets are buried in burn sites, in redacted files and whispers from the mouths of janitors who drank too much, and security guards who woke up one day without a job or a pension. But I found something. In Prague, beneath a pharmacy that hadn't sold medicine in years, I discovered a basement with black and white photographs pinned to the wall. Children. Some of them I recognized. Some of them looked like me. One had a date 1997, another a location Salzburg Forest, and a number. Dies. 12. My designation. I thought I was alone. I wasn't. I found others. Not many. Most had gone mad. Others hadn't lasted the first transformation, but one, a man named Thomas, still had fire in him. He'd been in Facility Delta somewhere in the Austrian Alps. They'd called him Beta Class. Said his DNA responded favorably. He remembered Murnau too. He never aged, Thomas told me. 20 years, same face, same voice. He wasn't a doctor. He was something else. I stayed with Thomas 3 nights. On the 4th, he didn't come back. His trailer was torn apart. No blood. Just claw marks on the walls, and a symbol carved into the ceiling. Not the wolf. The hand. That was when I realized I wasn't just hunting answers. I was being watched again. Tested. They wanted to see what I'd do when I lost something. They still saw me as one of theirs. I had to change the rules. So I went back to the ruins of Aberholtz, or what was left of it. Most of the buildings had collapsed. The snow covered everything like a shroud. But underneath the west wing, buried beneath blackened beams, I found a trap door. I remembered it. Even after all this time, it opened with a groan like an old animal waking up. Below, not the clinic, I remembered. Something older. Stone walls. Ritual marks, bones arranged in spirals. And a chair, iron, bolted to the floor, with shackles too thick for any human wrist. And a plaque behind it. Prototype 0, failed ascension. I didn't breathe. I just listened. Somewhere in the dark, I heard something shift. Not footsteps. Chains. Still hanging. Still swaying. And then a whisper. Not in any language I knew, but I understood it. This welcome back. I ran. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew I'd been led there. They wanted me to see it. To remember that I wasn't the first. Just the latest. I left the trapdoor open. Maybe as a warning. Maybe as bait. Back above ground, I lit a fire and burned what remained of the journals. Except one page. A floor map. Coordinates. A facility not in Europe, but here, in America. Somewhere in the Midwest. Labeled only Chimera 4. I packed what little I had. And I followed it. I found the place 3 days later. Hidden beneath an old grain silo. No guards, no locks. Just a keypad and a quiet hum behind concrete. The code was scratched into the doorframe like someone wanted me to get in. Inside, cold lights, dust, rooms long unused. And yet, not abandoned. Fresh footprints, a chair still warm. And a voice calm, familiar, impossibly alive. You're early, it said. I turned. More now. Not older, not younger, just the same. Exactly as Thomas had said. Still chasing wolves, I asked. He smiled. I never chased. I guided. You made me a monster. He shook his head slowly. No, I revealed what was already there. My hands shook. I wanted to kill him. But something deeper held me back. Curiosity. Why? He walked toward a console, pressed a button. A screen flickered to life. Images, footage. Of me, of Thomas, of children in cages, of transformations. You think this was about violence, he said. No, it was about evolution. You are the bridge. The first to resist the call and still return. I wanted to scream, but all I said was, I'm not yours. He looked at me, not with anger, with pride. No, he said, you're better. Then the lights cut out, and the alarms began to wail. I ran, not from fear, from certainty. Because in that moment I understood, this wasn't a lab, it was a stage. And I was the final act. I escaped. I always do. But something is different now. I wasn't alone in that silo. I felt it, heard it. Another heartbeat, another breath. Prototype 13, or something older. Whatever it is, they've released it. And this time, it's not coming for them. It's coming for me. I didn't sleep after the silo, not because I was afraid, but because I couldn't tell if I'd wake up as myself. Something had changed inside me. Not just a memory, not just a muscle twitch or a heat behind the eyes. Something deeper. Like a door had been opened, and I hadn't closed it fast enough. The nightmares came like waves. But not of Murnau, not of chains or needles. Of him. Prototype the Thuri, or whatever came after me. It didn't speak. It didn't stalk. It waited. I'd see it in dreams, hunched, ragged, barely human, crouched in the corner of an abandoned room. Its eyes weren't wild. They were calm. Like it knew. Like it understood everything I didn't. I started following its trail. Because that's what I do now, I follow. Not orders. Not clues. But the scent of what I used to be. The first time I saw its work was in Ohio. A backwoods clinic burned to its bones. 6 dead, 2 missing, blood on the ceilings, the windows broken from inside. But no signs of a struggle. Just release. Like whatever had been trapped there had let itself out. I knew the symbols carved on the walls. The sigil of Chimera. And something else I hadn't seen before. 3 claw marks, vertical, neatly placed. Almost reverent. I drove west, tracked reports, animal attacks, rural disappearances. Places where the moon didn't rise quite right. All led me to the mountains. An old federal observatory defunded, forgotten. Repurposed for something no one wanted to put their name on. Inside quiet, until I reached the main lab and saw the footage. Surveillance video. There he was. Taller than me. Skin gray at the edges, eyes too still. Not wild like mine when I shift, no, his were calculating. He moved like a man, but struck like something else. And on the last clip, he looked into the camera and smiled. Not cruelly, but knowingly. Like he saw me through the lens and wanted me to know he was coming. I left the observatory just before nightfall. It was already too late. He found me first. I was driving down a mountain road alone, trees whispering on either side. Then darkness. Headlights cut. Radio died. And in front of me, a shape, not a figure. A presence. I stepped out, and he was there. No growl, no roar, just watching. I could see parts of myself in him. The way he stood. The way his shoulders rose with breath. The twitch in his jaw like he was holding it back. Like I do. "What are you?" I asked. His voice was soft. Next, we didn't fight. Not then. We stared. And then, he ran. But not away. He wanted me to follow. And I did. For miles. Into the trees. Into the dark. Until we reached a clearing, ancient stone, broken statues. A chapel long, buried under moss and roots. He stopped. Turned. "Do you know," he said, "why they made us?" I said nothing. He continued. "To conquer fear." I nodded. "To make better soldiers." He shook his head. "To unmake them." That stopped me. "What do you mean?" "They wanted weapons, but they made mirrors." He stepped closer. "They put wolves in cages and forgot that wolves remember." And then he showed me scars, not from battle, from straps, burns, brandings. He'd escaped more than once, been dragged back, broken again. But not erased. Never erased. "I am not their monster," he said. "I am their echo." We stood in silence, and I realized he wasn't hunting me. He was warning me. "I'm not the danger," he said. "You are." And he walked away. Disappeared into the trees like mist. I stood in that clearing until dawn, trying to understand. Not just him, but me. What if he wasn't the final experiment? What if I was? What if they made him to find out what I'd do? And now that I'd found him, they had their answer. They knew I wouldn't kill him. They knew I'd listen, feel, connect, which meant I'd failed the test, or passed it depending on what they were measuring. That night, I returned to my motel. I looked in the mirror, and for the first time, I didn't see a man trying to hold himself together. I saw something waiting to be released. Something that had been caged by trauma, by guilt, by control, and now stood at the edge of its own leash. I still don't know what 3 really is. A shadow, a brother, a prophecy. But I know what I am. I'm no longer the boy from Aberholtz. No longer Subject 12. No longer a mistake. I'm memory. I'm design. And I'm ready. It was always going to end like this. Not in the woods, not under a full moon, but in a room full of men who thought they owned the night. I found Chimera's true headquarters beneath a biotech firm in Nevada. Posing as cancer researchers, they'd funneled billions into a black site called the Vault. A name so bland it almost worked until you listened to the walls whisper. It wasn't on any map, but I didn't need maps anymore. I had memories. and rage. I got in through the loading dock. Security was lighter than expected, too light, almost like they wanted me to come. I passed white corridors, silent labs, abandoned offices. The deeper I went, the newer it felt. Not decayed like Aberholtz, or rotting like Delta. This was operational. And then I saw it. My face, on a monitor. Labeled prototype took an active observed. And beneath it, failure to detonate phase unstable. Detonate. I didn't have time to guess. Alarms screamed. Steel doors slammed behind me. Gas hissed into vents. I fell to my knees as the scent of silver and chemical sedatives filled the air. My skin burned, my vision blurred. But I didn't fall. I rose. They wanted to test me again. I gave them a result they hadn't planned for. The change came, but not like before. Not in pain. In clarity. I didn't lose myself. I found myself. The claws were mine, the growl was mine, the fury all mine. I broke through 3 containment rooms before the gas stopped. And then came the voice. Murnau, projected from speakers embedded in the walls. Impressive, he said. Even now you exceed expectations. Shut up, I growled. Would you believe me, he continued, if I said this wasn't about power? I didn't answer, because it wasn't about belief anymore. It was about proof. I entered the main chamber, and there they were, 11 figures seated at a semicircle of black stone. Faces, hidden behind masks, shaped like ancient beasts, lion, serpent, hawk, wolf. One seat empty. Mine. No, his prototype thread. Because this wasn't judgment. It was initiation. You were never meant to die, one of them said. A woman's voice, sharp and cold. You were meant to choose. I stepped forward. I already have. The floor beneath me lit up. Symbols I remembered from Aberholtz, from the chapel in the woods, from my dreams. But now, I understood them. Not curses. Bindings. Control mechanisms for the inner wolf. Mental choke collars. That's why I'd never fully changed, never fully freed myself. They'd built the chains into my thoughts. And now they were trying to retighten them. I heard their hearts. 11. And another. Approaching. He stepped into the circle like a shadow come home. Thread. But not as a monster. As a man. Hair slicked, suit clean. Scar across his neck where a collar once burned. He stood beside the empty seat. This one passed the test, he said. One of the council scoffed. He disobeyed. 3 turned to me. Would you like to know the final phase? I didn't speak. I waited. He nodded. It's not transformation. He touched his chest. It's choice. He turned to the council. And he chose not to kill me. The room fell silent. The woman's voice broke it. Then he is broken. No threat, he said softly. He is free. Something cracked then. In the walls. In the lights. In me. Because I saw it clearly, what they'd feared all along. Not a werewolf. Not a weapon. A witness. A survivor who remembered everything. And worse. Couldn't tell it. That's why they labeled me unstable. That's why they let me get close to see if they could still own me. They couldn't. I turned to Threen. What happens now? He looked at the council and smiled. They brought us here to obey, but they taught us how to lead. I stepped forward. The woman's hand twitched, reaching for something. A button. A signal. I didn't care. I lunged. The table shattered. Masks flew. I didn't kill them all. Some ran. Some fought. But none escaped. When it was done, the room burned. The symbols scorched black. And in the center, 2 of us stood. Not beasts, not victims, but something else. I looked at the Thor. He nodded once, then vanished. I haven't seen him since, but I feel him. In the silence after the rain. In the eyes of strays on the street. In the part of me that still wonders who he really was. And who I am now. Not a monster. Not a man. But the only one left who knows the truth. And as long as I breathe, it won't stay buried. The fire took 6 hours to put out. By then, I was already gone. The desert swallowed me, just like it had swallowed the things they built beneath it. But not everything burns. Not memories, not instincts, not what they left behind inside me. I don't know how long I drove. Days, maybe. I lost track of gas stations, road signs, the taste of water. Sleep came in fractured bursts. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, not the council. The ones who never had a choice. Children in cages. Names whispered during sedation. Subjects who screamed during training until they forgot what a scream was. I carry them with me now. Not as ghosts. as witnesses, because I'm the only one left who remembers. And the world, it's not ready. The news blamed it on terrorism. Experimental biotech center destroyed in fire, lone suspect at large, armed and dangerous. No names, no history, no mention of Chimera. Just a grainy photo of me from years ago, blood on my shirt, eyes half-lidded. A monster. They always need one. It makes things easier to explain. I started leaving notes behind. Not confessions, not warnings. Clues. At first I wasn't sure why, but then I saw a pattern. The names I circled, the places I hinted at, someone was following them. Not Chimera, not the three, someone else. And they were getting closer. One night in a town so small it barely had a name, I walked into a diner. Ordered coffee, sat alone. And she sat across from me, mid-30s, sharp eyes, a crescent scar across her brow. She didn't smile. You left the journal page under a broken exit sign, she said. You wanted someone to find it. I didn't answer. She continued, you're not the only one who lost something to them. She slid a photograph across the table. A boy, 9 years old, teeth sharp as razors, eyes like mine. I was his mother, she said, before they took him. Silence stretched. I burned them, I said, all of them. Not all, she replied. Her name was Elise, former field surgeon. Recruited by Chimera, then discarded when she started asking questions. Now she hunted truth the way I once hunted peace. We didn't trust each other, but we understood each other. She told me there were others, survivors, orphans, whistleblowers in hiding, fragments of a network that never truly existed, because Chimera erased what didn't serve the narrative. Until now. Until someone like me made too much noise to silence. I asked her why she came. She looked at me. Because you're the only one they fear. Not because you kill, but because you remember. That night I dreamed again. Not of chains, of choices. I stood in a room, white, empty, except for 2 doors. One led back to silence, the other to truth. I opened neither. I woke up shaking, because maybe I'd been standing in that room my whole life. Since Aberholtz, since Prototype 0, since the first scar. Maybe all this time I'd been waiting for permission to leave, but no one can give it. Not Chimera, not 3D. Not even the woman with the scar. Only me. So I did. I stopped running. I stopped hiding. I started writing. Real names, real places, dates, methods, photos, logs, blueprints etched into my bones. Not for justice. Justice needs rules. What I needed was testimony. The kind no one can erase. They say the internet forgets, but that's a lie. It remembers what scares it, and I scare it. I posted everything anonymously. Encrypted. Hidden in puzzles, released in waves. Some were ignored. Others picked up by researchers, conspiracy theorists. Survivors too broken to speak, but not too broken to read. The truth began to ripple, not explode. Whispers first, then questions, then cracks. One night, I saw a sticker on a lamppost in a city I'd never been to. It said, "The wolf remembers." Underneath a claw mark. I didn't put it there. Someone else had picked up the howl. Someone else was listening. And I wasn't alone. Not anymore. But freedom is a strange thing. It doesn't taste sweet. It tastes empty. Like breath after the scream is gone. Like the air when the cell door opens and no one comes. Because when you've lived your whole life in fear of the leash, you forget what it's like to walk without it. Some days I still wake up expecting orders, expecting the click of boots outside the door. But it doesn't come. And neither does peace. Because freedom isn't the end. It's the beginning of who you really are. And I'm still learning, still remembering, still becoming. I don't know where 3D is, or if Elisa's still alive. I don't know if Chimera has gone fully silent or simply changed its name again. But I know this. They built me to obey, then punished me for thinking. They called me a weapon, then feared what happened when I refused to be pointed. They tried to erase me, and failed. Now, I am writing myself back into the world, word by word, scar by scar, howl by howl. It started with a name, not mine, hers, Elena Ward. I found it buried in a database dump Elise sent me before she disappeared. Among the ruins of Chimera's wiped patient logs, this one name refused to vanish. No code name, no experiment ID, just a file titled Mother. For weeks I avoided opening it. Some things are heavier than bullets. When I finally did, I couldn't breathe. Photos, dozens of them. Some blurred by time, some half-burned. A woman in a lab coat, holding me. I was small, barely formed, tubes in my arm. A barcode across my wrist. Her eyes were tired, but not cruel. She wasn't just a researcher. She was my mother, or the closest thing I'd ever had to one. The logs told the rest. She'd worked on early iterations of Project Fenris, before Chimera was Chimera, before ethics were erased by ambition. Her specialty, genetic boundary collapse, the blending of predator and prey. And she volunteered me. Not kidnapped, not stolen. Born for it. Elena wasn't just a doctor. She was the architect. They'd created me in vitro. Spliced DNA sequences meant to amplify regenerative resilience and trigger controlled transformation under psychological stress. I was never meant to be a person. I was a proof of concept, a thesis in blood and bone. But something changed. At 6 months, the logs show unexpected bonding. She stopped logging chemical data and started writing poetry, letters, notes to no one, dreams she had. What I smiled at, how I cried when the lights flickered, and then removed from lab. An incident not specified. 3 staff terminated. 1 fled. No further entries under her name. Until the final note, scanned from handwriting not typed. I gave them everything, but I won't give them him. Not again, I'm sorry. One day you'll understand why I left. E.W. I stared at that sentence until my eyes burned. She tried to save me, and failed. Or maybe she succeeded. Maybe the fire at Aberholtz wasn't the first time someone broke protocol. Maybe I inherited that rebellion, not through design, but through love. A concept Chimera never calculated for. But there was more. Another file, encrypted, buried behind 3 passwords, all variations of my name. It opened to a single sentence. Zero still lives. My heart stopped. Prototype 0. The first. The one they said failed? But what if he didn't? What if they buried him because he escaped? What if I wasn't the first success? Just the first they could still control. I started digging, cross-referencing old facility code names, shuttered sites, locations Chimera deemed compromised. One stood out. A remote island in the Baltic Sea. No longer on maps. Once labeled Project Dawn. I had no plan. Just a ferry ticket and a bag full of scars. The island was cold. Wind-gnawed. A church in ruins. An asylum beneath it overgrown but intact. I found the door open. Someone had been there recently. Inside, chalk marks on the walls. Prayers in 3 languages. And a message. Not the first, not the last, but the one who must decide. At the end of a long corridor, I found a room. Small, bare. A chair in the corner. Chains unlocked. And on the wall, a mirror. Cracked, but whole enough to reflect. A man stood there. Older. Eyes gold. Hair silver. Hands still. I didn't recognize him, but he recognized me. You found me, he said. His voice was sand and thunder. Are you Zero? I asked. He nodded. I was. Now I'm just here. He didn't approach. Neither did I. We stood like reflections. 2 results of the same equation, one erased, one escaped. I thought you died, I said. They hoped I had. Silence. Why stay, I asked. He smiled bitter. Because sometimes the monster they build is the only thing left to watch them fall. And then quieter. And because I wanted to see if one of us would become more than what they made. I stepped closer. And did I? He looked at me. For a long, long time. Then said, not yet. I left before dark. No promises, no vows, just 2 shadows parting. I don't know if I'll ever see him again, but I know what he meant. The test isn't over. The program may have ended. The labs may be ash, but the idea so. The thought that we can shape monsters and call it science that lives on, in other forms, in other names. I can't kill it, but I can expose it, with every word I write, with every truth I bleed. And maybe someday, that will be enough to become what he hoped. Not the first, not the last, but the one who decided to be more. My name is not Prototype 12, not Subject 12, not Fenris Child, not Weapon, not Monster. My name is the one they never gave me. The one I choose now, but I won't write it here. Because this story isn't about who I was. It's about what I became after everything they took, everything they broke, everything they left me to carry. I thought this would end with fire, with bodies, with revenge. But the truth is quieter than I expected. It doesn't shout. It whispers through pages left behind, through footsteps that no longer hide, through breath that doesn't tremble when the past reaches out. I live now. In a cabin somewhere no one thinks to look. The woods are thick. The air is cold. But the silence, It's mine. No alarms, no masks, no whispering observers. Just the wind, the earth, and the steady rhythm of being alive. Some days I walk until my legs shake. Other days I write until my fingers ache. There are still nightmares, but now I let them come. Because even monsters deserve to sleep. I keep a notebook. Not like the ones from the labs filled with graphs and data and pain-labeled anomaly. This one has drawings. Letters to people I've never met. Pages that begin with "remember when." Even if no one else does. Sometimes I leave pages behind. In libraries, on bus seats. Folded between menus in diners I pass through only once. Stories of things that were never meant to be spoken aloud. Not because I want sympathy, but because silence is how they win. And noise. Truthful noise is the first step toward undoing them. I've heard whispers of a movement now. Not an army. Not a rebellion. A remembrance. People telling stories that sound like mine. Children with strange dreams. Old men muttering about symbols in places no map records. The howl is spreading. Not as fear. As reminder. That we existed. That we survived. That they didn't erase us even when they burned the files and buried the names. I've thought of tracking down their three again. Of asking him what he's found, what he's building in the shadows. But maybe some stories don't need reunions. Maybe it's enough to know we both walked away. Free. Changed. Human in the only way that matters. Well, by choice. I still don't know what's inside me. Fully. Whether the wolf waits beneath my skin, or whether I've simply learned how to live with the parts they tried to weaponize. But I do know this. I am not their result. I am my own process. And every breath I take without permission is victory. This is the last page of this story, but not the last chapter of me. Because when you survive something designed to unmake you, every moment after is a kind of resurrection. So if you're reading this, if you've ever wondered if you were made wrong, if you were born broken, if the thing inside you was too wild to be loved, let me tell you something I learned too late. You are not a failure. You are not a curse. You are not a monster. You are the evidence that their systems couldn't erase. And your voice. It is louder than the cages ever were. Mine was, and still is. I leave this not as a confession, not as a warning, but as a beginning. Because they made me to be a weapon. But I became a witness. And now I'm telling the world. The wolf remembers, and we are not done howling.